I grew up on a farm about an hour sort of northwest of here. A little farming community. Spent a lot of time on weekends and after school doing farm work. Could not wait to escape to the city and go to university and explore the world and expand my mind. And I was living a really carefree life, concerned only with my own needs. Traveling, partying, just having a good time, being social. But I got sick a couple of times. So I went to my doctor's, he ran a couple of tests, and I went back to him a couple of weeks later to get the test results back, and I can still hear his voice echoing in the back of my head. As he closed the door, he said, "Unfortunately, you have tested positive for HIV." And in that instant, my world changed. I went from a living person to a dying statistic. I withdrew from the world, my family, my friends. I became very isolated. Perhaps not surprisingly, I slid into a deep clinical depression. And I dealt with a lot of emotions: guilt, anger, fear, and shame. And so for the next few years, I lived under a cloud of despair, really feeling isolated, lonely, and stigmatized and marginalized. And then I found myself back in my doctor's office. I'd been getting progressively more sick, and now he's saying to me, if you don't start on ARV medications, you're going to get an opportunistic infection, and we may not be able to help you. So he prescribed ARVs, but he may as well have prescribed hope, for before even taking the first dose, I made a promise to myself. I was going to change, and I was going to live my dreams. And for me, that meant accessing support services at AIDS service organizations like the AIDS Committee of York Region. And by accessing those services, I hooked myself into a community of people that were compassionate and empathetic, who were non-judgmental, who understood where I was coming from, who had similar experiences to myself. And suddenly, I didn't feel so alone. I wasn't isolated. I didn't feel stigmatized. I became part of a bigger community. And by hooking up and connecting with those other people, it really turned around my future. Suddenly I could make plans, I could be productive, I can contribute to society, and that really had a profound effect on my life trajectory. And so I started to go to support groups, art therapy, narrative writing therapy, really just accessing the supports in the community so that I wasn't feeling so alone, so isolated. So that I could share my emotions and my feelings and my experiences with other people who are going through the same things. So that really helped to empower me. It allowed me to start thinking of the future and start planning and start really looking at, well, where am I in all of this, in this global AIDS pandemic? And what I came to the conclusion was that because I'm one of the minority of HIV positive people in the world with access to ARV medications, it was incumbent upon me to try and increase access for other people, especially for those living in the developing world. So I decided to devote my time and energy to increasing access to ARVs for people in the developing world. So if there was one crucial thing that I would have to attribute the turnaround that I felt in my personal development, it was accessing the services of AIDS service organizations like the AIDS Committee of York Region. You know, the ARVs, they took care of my physical, my medical needs, and I still needed to take care of my social mental health needs, and that's really where ASOs come into play, with support groups, with counseling, art therapy, narrative writing therapy. All of these things really helped me come out of my shell and come out of the isolation that I was feeling. And that's the one message that I'd really want to give out to people that are either infected or affected by HIV/AIDS, is to access the services, because there's people there that are empathetic and compassionate, and you're not alone.